Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to Collider Video and our special Ant-Man spoilers review. Now, for those of you who are new to our spoilers review, big warning up front. We are giving away spoilers in this review. We are talking as a bunch of friends, including you, joining us in our circle of friendship, talking about Ant-Man as if you've seen the movie. So please make sure you have seen Ant-Man before you watch this video. You've been warned. This is going to be full of spoilers, and I love doing these things. All right, joining me today, sitting over here, is Mr. Dennis Zen.
How do I get out of this circle of friendship that you mentioned?
Just think of more of a shackle of friendship.
All right.
It's in the shape of a circle. Over here is Mr. Mark Ellis.
Yeah, I'm going to be the one giving the most spoilers, so
Oh, I thought you said you were
get
going
ready
to
to get spoiled.
I thought you said you were going to be giving the most friendship. And over there, Mr. Christian Harloff.
Let's do it. Come on, let's get ready to spoil some stuff.
Okay, so we're going to talk some spoilers here, and this is the way we usually break down our spoilers review. Now, those of you who are subscribers to our channel, if you're not subscribers to our channel, you should be subscribed to our Collider Video YouTube channel. But if you are, you probably noticed that Mark and I already did a review, but now we're going to go right into it, full blown. We're going to talk about things we liked about the film, things we didn't like about the film, overall impressions. We're going to end this whole thing off by giving this thing a score. So let's start with just some general surface stuff. Just in 1 minute or less, your general impressions of Ant-Man. Christian, let's start with you. Go.
I thought Ant-Man was a perfect blend of humor tied into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I thought that especially for an unknown property that nobody really knew what it could be, and the sound of Ant-Man could be pure ridiculous, and all the problems that it had with the Edgar Wright fiasco, if you want to even call it a fiasco. I thought that, unlike what Iron Man 2 did, where it beat you over the head with Avengers references, this showed you were still part of the same universe, but you still felt like it was a standalone movie, and that it introduced brand new characters that were going to take you further along into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I thought it was a perfect blend of that. It was a heist film. It felt like a heist film. It didn't have to rely on big action set pieces and too many characters, and because of that, I really enjoyed it.
Mark?
In a time when we get so inundated with origin stories, this was one of the best origin stories I've seen recently because, like Christian said, it had that blend of action and comedy. I love the way that Paul Rudd's character discovered the suit and how Michael Douglas set up all those traps for him when they're breaking in to Michael Douglas's place and they don't realize what exactly they're getting themselves into, and he discovers the suit. That first scene when he's in the bathtub and he's playing around with the suit, yeah. It was, as soon as I saw that scene, I knew that we were in for a great ride, because I was already laughing by that point. I loved the Baskin-Robbins jokes. Everything about this movie was tickling the funny bone. When I saw him shrink and have to ride the bath train, he ended up all the way outside of his own apartment building. I was like, the action scenes for the rest of this movie are going to be spectacular. Then he links up with the other insects, and I think, Christian, you're the first one to point out, I didn't know that I could feel emotional about an insect or like a fly, like rooting for them to survive, because in my real life, I'll swat the hell out of one of you. But in the movie, I'm like, no, that's my boy. I don't want him to go.
Anthony.
No, Anthony.
Is that really his name?
Yeah.
Anthony.
Oh,
Anthony.
Well, okay, my score might go down a little bit, but still, really good movie. And the scene with seeing the way that it tied into the Avengers and the two post-credit scenes, I thought both really paid off, both in servicing a continuation of just Ant-Man and then also tying into the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe. I was hoping they'd throw a little bit more Spider-Man stuff in there, but we did get a reference to Spider-Man right before the credits rolled. So I was so happy with both this movie in and of itself and how it pertains to the larger cinematic universe.
The genius of that Spider-Man reference at the end was, when they were shooting this film, the Spider-Man deal was not done between Sony and Marvel. It wasn't done yet. It might have been in the works. I'm sure it had been in the works for a long time. But their reference was, even if the Spider-Man deal never got made, they say, well, we weren't talking about Spider-Man. Because we got a guy who swings, a guy who climbs up walls, and you can say, whoa, we didn't say Spider-Man. That could be anybody. It could be anything. It was a really nice way they did that. Dennis, your quick impression of the film.
I really enjoyed it. It was a nice change of pace from Avengers Age of Ultron, which I also really liked. I'm not bagging on that. But that was the big, epic, lots of action, tons of characters. And this was, pun intended, a smaller film. Yeah. And it worked because of the dynamics and the chemistry between all the characters and actors like Paul Rudd and Michael Douglas. Michael Douglas really stood out to me because not only is he a fantastic actor, in this role, he bought into it. So, it wasn't Michael Douglas getting a paycheck. He actually played the role of Hank Pym like any other serious drama narrative that he would be hired for. So That, and you had Michael Pena and all the other side characters and supporting characters, Evangeline Lilly, all the interactions between those characters. I think that's what got me.
All right, well, let's get into some of the heavier stuff then. Let's start to analyze, and we'll start with what I think is probably going to take up most of the show. Let's talk about the things we really liked about Ant-Man, the different elements of things about Ant-Man that we enjoyed. Mark, let's start with you. What would you gather under this big Christmas tree of goodness that you would call the things you liked about Ant-Man?
Well, I like when a movie can surprise me, even when I'm expecting good things, is that I didn't know that how well, when he shrunk, how well the ant scenes would look with the actual ants. The fear is that it's going to look like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids for a comic book, and it didn't feel like that at all. I never once felt like I was watching something just made for kids, even though I think kids are going to get a huge kick out of those scenes. Watching him lead the army and how it's on its nose, it sounds like such a cockamamie premise that, oh, you can communicate with ants, and watching them move sugar cubes into tea is going to be a predecessor for them actually pulling off a top secret mission with you. But I bought it. Like, I couldn't believe after I left the movie that how well it made me buy into all these things that normally sound so ridiculous to look at on paper. And the fact that every superhero movie to some extent is about the end of the world, and we got to stop the end of the world, or else if this villain gets this power, he's going to ruin the world. But it never felt like something as big as Avengers Age of Ultron did, which I loved how big that felt. I also loved that this didn't feel like the entire world was at stake, is that we had one mission to go on, we executed the mission, we got some obstacles, we overcame them, and we had such a great time on that journey.
What about you, Christian?
There's a lot that I loved about it, and I was lucky enough. You sent me back to the Ant-Man set in October of last year.
Yeah, that's right.
And then I went to ILM this year, like about a month and a half, 2 months ago, to watch a lot. I've seen the shrinking stuff. Peyton Reed had showed a whole bunch of us what it was going to look like, so I was ready for it. I got to see a lot of these scenes, but you have to remember of the shrinking technology and the way that you use this. The Russo brothers are going to have to use this now on. Like, everyone who decides to use Ant-Man from now on has to use what Peyton Reed and his team did. And I thought they're lucky that he did it this way, because it was tremendous. And that's really what I enjoyed, was that, and I said it in the beginning here, was the blend. That humor, I didn't necessarily love that Baskin-Robbins scene, and that was actually one of the scenes that we had seen at ILM. I liked it better the second time, maybe because I saw it coming. Loved Michael Pena. I thought his comedy, and that the way that they used that device of, oh, here's a time, and it flashed back, and you saw everyone's voices going on other characters. Right. That device, they used it 2 or 3 times. I thought that was brilliant. I thought it was a fun way to it wasn't just shtick, it furthered the story. But I mean, how do you not say one of my favorite moments of all time, going back into furthering the story yet still tying us into the MCU, was the fight scene against Falcon, because it showed that, oh, we're very aware that the Avengers are here. We're also very aware that Hank Pym does not like S.H.I.E.L.D., does not like the Avengers, has a history with them. Thought he bridged the gap really well. But that fight scene showing us, okay, this is where this dude fits in, and it also fit into the overall heist of what this movie is ultimately about. It is a heist film, and because you have the team, the Misfits team, if you will, and with Hank, the big wigs of the Hank Pym, Scott, and Evangeline Lilly's character, and then the comic relief, the tech guy, and everyone else there. And I thought that the villain,
Corey Stoll.
I thought Corey Stoll worked great, because what I really loved about this movie was the father-son-daughter relationship all the way around. You had it with Scott and his daughter. You had it with Scott and Hank. You had it with Hank and his daughter, and Hank and Corey Stoll. Yeah. That was the theme of the movie, and the theme stayed consistent throughout the entire time. But all of that, and that the way it just consistently made me laugh, it made me feel like I was part of it. I was never bored. There was 1 or 2 things that bothered me, but we're not there yet. But overall, it was, and what Mark said, this is one of the best standalone origin films, I'd almost say since Iron Man. I really would.
Yeah, I'll go on a record. I think, for me, this is the best origin story Marvel has told. I like this movie better than Iron Man 1. Wow. I don't like, as far as the Marvel standalone films go, I don't think it's quite Captain America Winter Soldier, which is still my favorite Marvel standalone film, but it might be my second favorite Marvel standalone film, and probably their best origin one, because Winter Soldier was not an origin story. So many things I liked about this movie, and I was so primed that there were so many things. You're going to a movie called Ant-Man that could disappoint you. I remember you told me, after you came back from the set visit, you said, yeah, you saw a bit of that scene of the Baskin Robbins in the trailer. I don't think you're going to like that scene. I was totally prepared not to like the scene, and I really liked the scene. I thought it worked actually quite well. And like you said, Peyton Reed approached this film very efficiently. Every scene had a purpose. Even that Baskin Robbins scene, because it wasn't just, showing Scott losing his job and has some funny dialogue. It was establishing who he really was and what he did that would make him of interest to a guy like Hank Pym later. Like every one of those scenes was used to do something to further the story along. And I really admired that. I got to start with this though. Michael Pena in this movie was such a pleasant surprise. I always like Michael Pena. He's always good. But I remember the first 5 minutes of this movie, when he first shows up there and he's at the van waiting for Scott to come out of prison, and he talks for about a minute or two, I'm thinking, I'm going to find this guy annoying. And then by the end of the film, all I wanted was more Luis. I just wanted more Luis, more. Give me more Michael Pena, because his character was so great. We said it before on the show, but the character is basically Ray Ora. Sitting back there switching. It's basically Ray Ora, which is, so I can't, Ray still hasn't seen the movie.
John, you know what I think it is with Michael Pena too?
that?
You know, if you have for me, one of my biggest problems with Thor and Thor Dark World was Kat Dennings. I thought that the comedy was kind of overbearing. Michael Pena serves the same role as Kat Dennings, but still did it in a way that you believe that he fit into this universe, as where for me anyway, I felt that Kat Dennings did not.
And T.I. a little bit too, watching them and the other gentleman who's
David, he has a really long last name. He's from The Dark Knight.
He's in The Dark Knight
and Prisoners.
Right. That trio hanging out in the van together during the climactic battle scene was just, it was such a fun, because you have all this intense action going on inside the building, then outside seeing them and getting into their own little zany adventure, trying to ditch Bobby Cannavale and the cops. I thought it was a nice back and forth there at the end.
Well, I mean, more to that point, talking about those guys, is that you would understandably be given the wrong impression that these guys, like the crew of Luis, Dave, and T.I., they are there to be the comic relief, period. But at different moments throughout the film, each of them exhibit moments of heroism.
Yeah.
Whether it's T.I. going, like realizing they're going to arrest Hank Pym and this whole plan's gone. He runs out, steals the cop car, right? And then you got Dave in the van, pulling the things off. You got Luis punching out the one guard and remembering to go back and save his life later. All of them at moments, they all brought the comic relief. Nothing's going to stop us from helping Scott. Just backing up. Backing up. And you'd think after 3 or 4 times of saying backing up, it would get tired. But every time he said it after that, it kept getting funnier and funnier and funnier. So they were great comic relief. They pushed the story forward, and they had legitimate moments of heroism. They played key parts in the heist. Going back to more close to the beginning of the film, I love what they did with Michael Douglas and Hank Pym. I love what they did with Hank Pym in this, because not only was it a great story for the movie, it opens up a lot of possibilities for what they can do in the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Hank Pym moving forward. I mean, they've already announced another season of Agent Carter. You can incorporate Hank Pym into that now, because clearly they know each other. And how great was it seeing Haley
Atwell.
I was going to say
Peggy.
Haley Statwell. Haley Atwell in that as a slightly older Agent Carter. I thought that scene was great.
The visual effects in that sequence are fantastic. Like look, you can tell it's CG, but it was pretty close. Pretty close. And with Peggy Carter, because I remember they had her aged in Winter Soldier, and I had commented, I think we all thought like, oh, they did such a great job with the prosthetics, but it actually was CG, and this time they nailed it again.
They nailed it again. Michael, I mean, a lot of it was makeup on Michael Douglas, but they did all the fine tuning with CG, and they did a great job on it. I kind of thought they should have brought back. I know they used the guy from Mad Men as Howard Stark before. I kind of thought they should have brought back
Dominic.
Cooper. I thought they should have brought him back again too. But whatever, it worked. It totally worked. But seeing him, in a way, this isn't an origin story in a way. Ant-Man's been around for a long time. I think you made a great analogy. You said, this isn't an origin story. This is a passing of the torch story. And I think that was...
Sounds like something I'd say.
Yeah.
Yes, it was brilliant.
Is it smart? Then I said it.
Yes,
right?
It was brilliant the way you said it. But seeing that he had these adventures in the past, I like how with one line they explain, well, why doesn't he just wear the suit? The suit takes its toll.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's something he told me that interview I did with him a few months ago for that pre-Avengers thing. He explained that, you can only shrink so many times. And he turns to the camera and goes, right, guys? You know what I'm talking about. Which I thought was great. So the way they used him was great. The heist itself was great. Eric Stoll was wonderful in the role.
Corey Stoll. Yeah.
Corey Stoll. I keep on seeing Eric. That's another guy. And because he's physically intimidating, yet I buy him as a science guy at the same time. So he was able to incorporate all of that. The action, this is not an action film. It's not an action film, but the action was great. That Falcon scene, unbelievable.
yeah.
Everybody in the theater, the first time I saw this film, lost their minds when that happened. So that was it. That little girl, how cute is that little
She's
girl?
adorable. Yeah.
Oh my God, you just want to eat her. The moment she goes, he's so ugly, I love him. Like everybody melted in the theater. I think it's like, yep, you would do anything. And I said this in our review, but I couldn't go into detail. My biggest pet peeve in any movie, a stereotype in any movie, is when the new boyfriend of the hero's love interest is always 100% a dick. He's always just a big walking douchebag in every movie. That's the way it always happens. And yet in this, they didn't do that. They make you think he is at first, but when it comes down to it, he loves that little girl. He's willing to sacrifice himself to save them, and they end up being a family at the end. And I thought that was really cool. You don't see that happen much. I could go on and on. I'm going to take a breath here for a second because so many things I like about this movie. Dennis, some of the things that really stood out to you about Ant-Man.
Yeah, I agree with you guys about the macro cinematography. Anytime when he shrank, I loved all those sequences. The battle with Falcon was fantastic, and yeah, my favorite part was the dynamics between all the characters and the relationships and the motivation. You got that Scott Lang wanted to reconnect with his daughter. He wanted to do right by her, and all his motivation was towards that. With Hank Pym and his daughter Hope, played by Evangeline Lilly, you see that backstory about his wife and her mom and how they lost her, and that's why they have kind of that split, because he doesn't want her to take that risk of going subatomic and losing her as well. And the post-credit scenes, we haven't talked about those. The scene where Hank Pym shows her the suit,
the new Wasp suit.
Yeah, so we're gonna see her again, and then we have the Winter Soldier Bucky scene at the very end.
Yeah, or the Civil War
lead up,
and also the tie-ins to Doctor Strange. I mean, it wasn't.
I didn't notice it.
It wasn't. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that from him going into that realm, I thought that that's really where
going subatomic.
Subatomic.
I thought I saw that as just the physical realm. I didn't see that as a mystical.
Oh,
realm.
really? Okay.
Yeah.
For me, maybe I took it wrong though, because I felt that was kind of setting up a Doctor Strange kind of tie-in. Maybe I'm wrong.
Man, if though there would have been a cool opportunity though there, if as he's shrinking more and more, going into particles and getting smaller than atoms and all that kind of stuff, and he's hearing all of his own recollection of the voices of dialogue we've already heard in the movie. If at some point we just heard Sorcerer Supreme, something like that, that would have been pretty cool.
That's where I took it. I thought maybe that realm, because they open it up, even if it wasn't necessarily a tie-in to that particular movie, the fact that exists and that type of they're going more into that realm. I'm very interested to see where they go next with this next standalone in Doctor Strange.
Right. Going to none of us actually mentioned till you did Hope.
Yeah.
Right.
The scene when she has one of her blowups with her dad and goes out to the car, and then Scott follows in, and that the scene was very well written. I thought the dialogue was perfect. He says, like, "What aren't you getting here? I'm in the suit because I'm expendable." And the line that I loved was, "He would rather lose this fight than lose you."
Yeah.
Awesome line.
Right.
Just an awesome line, and it made me buy into the scene immediately.
And was so crucial in the movie at that point, because that was one of the things that I was wondering is like, well, wait, Evangeline Lilly clearly is an ass kicker, so why wouldn't you just put her in the suit and let her handle this thing in 5 minutes? But it's because Michael Douglas has this past where he lost his best gal in that same predicament, and so he doesn't want to do it again with his daughter, and it just made perfect sense to me.
It does, and I think that's another thing. We're talking about Peyton Reed and the dynamic of the cast. We have to give Paul Rudd and Adam McKay a lot of credit for the writing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, because when you hear those guys are going to write initially, you go, well, what's this going to be? Wet Hot American Summer 2? Like,
you're still waiting for it.
We're still waiting for it. It's coming out. But, you think about that. And granted, it's based off of the initial draft that Edgar Wright had done, and they did a lot of drafts off of that. But speaking to these guys on set, like, these were fans of the property, like, especially Peyton Reed. Peyton Reed's like a diehard Ant-Man fan, and you can tell. And I think that really came across between that, the writing, and I also don't think it was one of those movies where the lead actor got a hold of the script and made it a Paul Rudd vehicle. He was great in the movie, but off of Dennis's point of how much the cast worked. Yeah. It focused on all of the cast, and that is a testament to what Adam McKay and Paul Rudd did for this script.
One of the really clever things they did was that right near the end of the movie, after Paul Rudd and Michael Douglas had the conversation about how did you come out of that? What do you remember? And Michael Douglas is alone in the room and going, is it possible? Then he looks at a family portrait, and this is where it was really clever. And you see a young Michael Douglas with a little baby and a woman wearing a big rimmed hat covering her face. All you see is the bottom part with a smile. What that tells me, we're going to see the original Wasp at some point. We're going to see her because they knew it, so they thought, we can't commit to showing the actress's face at this point because we don't know who the actress is going to be. Cover her face. So that tells me huge that they plan on her coming out of the sub. And remember, Michael Douglas says, in that subatomic realm, time has no meaning. So they're going to pull her out, and she's still going to be 30. Right. They're going to pull her out, and she's still going to be 30.
Michael Douglas will once again be with a much younger woman.
It's in his contract. That's the way it's got to be. So, I mean, I love it. And then, of course, the second, you were pointing out the first post-credit scene, which got everybody excited, that seeing that Wasp suit, the second Wasp suit. Then the second one, when some people thought, when Falcon turned to Cap and said, I know a guy. Some people were telling me online, it's like, oh, he's talking about Spider-Man. It's like, no, the movie is Ant-Man, and as soon as he says, I know a guy, screen goes black and the words, Ant-Man will return. Clearly, he's talking about Ant-Man.
No, it's totally Spider-Man. Because if that's Spider-Man, Christian owes me a steak dinner. The other way around, I owe him a steak dinner.
The reason also, from what I heard, is that wasn't even intended as a post-credit scene. Those were from the dailies of Civil War.
Really? And then they just dropped it in there.
And then they dropped it in there, and whether or not that, how much of the cut that particular scene made, because it makes sense when you think about it, because are you just going to throw them finding the Winter Soldier as a random credit scene? There's going to be more to that in Civil War. It could be right off the beginning, and how Ant-Man gets involved. I think that's probably the case. So yeah, it made sense, because if you look at it, watch those post-credit scenes again, watch the Wasp scene. Seems like it's right out of the movie, and then you see that the way that particular post-credit scene is shot, it looks like a daily. And when I heard that after I saw it, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Go back and watch it again. You'll see how it looks a little different.
And they hinted at with Falcon trying to find Scott Lang and Ant-Man after their encounter. Yeah. He's like asking around about him.
Yo, I'm looking for this dude with super mad skills. Oh man, that was so well done. Like the fact that they're using the dialogue that Michael Pena was saying, but clearly what the original character was not saying, but then visually showing it, the original character saying it in the most ridiculous words. And everybody knows that the Asian girl who's supposed to be like, I'm a majorly skilled guerrilla journalist or whatever. That's like, she's like some big YouTube star.
Oh,
she's like I keep forgetting her name, but Ann and Kaori keep telling me, oh, that's so and so, and I can't remember her name. But
Wendy.
Was it Wendy who said that? Wendy, did you recognize her? Anna Optana. Well, there she goes. Now she's in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
You said YouTube? What you said?
What's this thing called YouTube?
The YouTubes.
The YouTubes. All right, so let's then move. I'm sure other positives will pop up in our heads as we go, but for now, let's sidetrack. It's not a perfect movie. No movie is. So let's start talking about some of the things that maybe the film could have done better. Dennis, let's start with you. What were some of the things in Ant-Man that you thought, that one maybe didn't work so well?
Well, I think it had to do, and they weren't like majorly sticking out where, I don't like this movie anymore. It detracted too much. One was obviously the Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne relationship. That, at the end, they're suddenly in this romantic relationship, which they didn't really build to. They kind of rushed into. I thought that was a little fast for them. And then the relationship between Corey Stoll, Darren Cross, and Hank Pym, the whole mentor-mentee thing, I think that as a concept, it was great for the story, but they needed to flesh it out more. There were some good scenes in there, but I wanted to hear and see more from that dynamic.
Christian, some things that could have worked better.
I agree with you that it was nice to see a change of pace in the dick boyfriend, if you will.
Yeah.
But I thought that storyline sometimes got a little goofy when the two cops were running. It could have had Benny Hill music. It got a little silly, especially when they're running up the stairs. They're chasing. It's like, that those particular cops I could have done without, maybe until the very end. I agree. I think that the thing I guess for Corey Stoll was, even though I thought he was a great villain, there was a particular scene where he just blows away the guy in the bathroom, and which is he went from these stages of, because it was the suit was messing with his mind,
brain, yeah.
but that kind of was revealed kind of even towards the end with Evangeline Lilly saying
She screamed it out.
It's messing with your mind, and you're like, oh, that's why he's crazy. I just
You're
thought he was
sick.
crazy.
I can help you.
Yeah, you didn't really see that progression. It just seemed like, oh, he's just out of his mind in general. Oh, it's because of the suit. That could have been explained a little better, but I'm nitpicking here. There really isn't that much, and even though I one of the things I praised it for was that it didn't have to be this over the top action piece, and maybe they just spaced out the action just a little bit more to where, because I thought you got some big spaces before you got any type of action. But that's really it. Like I said, I'm nitpicking.
Yeah, I can nitpick a little bit, and that's it. Is that I thought that Cross's relation, I thought Cross was maybe too smart of a villain to keep Hope that much in his inner loop, because again, you got to know that this is Pym's daughter, and I don't care how bad of a falling out they had. That's not the person you keep in your inner circle when you're developing this technology that's going to be your rival and maybe overtaking what your mentor did, who happens to be the father of this person you're keeping so close. So I didn't really buy that as much. And then at the end, like the huge, when the little train turns into a huge train and the cops are looking at it, like that leaves a lot of questions to be
I love
asked.
that part.
It was
Honestly,
hilarious.
I loved it.
But then you accept the fact that we are in the MCU here, and all these crazy things have happened. Like the Battle for New York has happened already. So cops seeing a huge train come out of nowhere isn't the shocker that it might be to all of us when we get home tonight. So very small things that never once hampered my enjoyment of the movie.
I thought there were moments in the film that I do think while I said at one point that I believe that they approach this film very efficiently, and I do believe that, I also believe that probably could have stood being edited a little bit more, trimmed down a little bit more. I felt there were segments of the film that felt like they started to drag. Never dragged on too long, but there were moments that I felt that started to drag a little bit, so that was one of my criticisms. One of my generic criticisms of a lot of Marvel films is that by the end of the day, it's a little bit of a throwaway villain. Yellow Jacket, by the end of the day, no one's going to remember Yellow Jacket very much later on. Like Loki notwithstanding, Marvel doesn't really nail their villains very well. And, Yellow Jacket just kind of pops up for the final battle of the movie. I thought overall, Cross was a pretty decent threat in the film, but Yellow Jacket was not. And that was a little bit unfortunate to see for me. Also, although they had a scene dedicated to trying to explain it, I never bought it. Why didn't Hank just tell her what happened to her mom? And because they have that scene where he's finally explaining it to her just because she got mad at him. And then he's explaining, he's like, really? Like she was a lot madder at you before when she was voting you out of your own company. But she's a little bit mad at him, and he tells her the story about what happens. And then they try to offset it by her asking him, why didn't you tell me this before? And he just says, I was trying to protect you. It's like, no, that doesn't explain it to me as an audience why you didn't just tell her this a long time ago. You guys could have had a relationship this whole time, but instead you've been estranged from each other because of this. So I never really bought into that. I didn't like that very much. But honestly, I don't know. Maybe some of the scenes could have been color corrected a little better. Honestly, I found Ant-Man to be a thoroughly entertaining movie. I was entertained from start to finish, from like some serious, heavy world, potentially altering consequences to great little jokes like, Baskin Robbins always finds out. And then later, Michael Pena, oh man, Baskin Robbins always finds out. Like the callback jokes, it was just so well tempered, Yeah. I just enjoyed this film immensely. And we were talking about this before we started shooting. This is one of those rare films. Normally, a movie like this comes out and the first critic ratings are high. Like Rotten Tomatoes would be like 88%. But then as more ratings come out, it goes down 85, 82, maybe settles around 79. This movie, everybody's worried at first because it was like 68% to start.
Lower.
And was it even lower than that? And people thought it was just going to go down from there. But the ratings have actually been going up to like, as of this recording, it's at like 78, 79%. It's climbed like 10 or 11%.
Deserves
It
way
might even
more.
go, and it deserves more. It might go over 80. Look, I acknowledge, I don't think this is a movie that's for everyone, but man, did it ever work for me.
Well, I think when you noted before, and you made a good point of saying this is not a heavy action movie. I think that a lot of people, one of the notes that I heard from people going, it just was a little slow, and it didn't have those big, because you just came off of Ultron.
Yeah,
and so
right.
if you're coming off of a Marvel movie, Ultron, you are not getting the same movie here. You're not. This is, you have to remember that it's a well put together heist film that the main action pieces come at the end. Another note of the positive that I forgot to mention is the score, and I have to find out who the composer
that's
is.
right, yeah.
The music's incredible on this movie, and the good thing and bad thing Marvel does, Marvel nails every one of their standalone movies. When they start the first movie, the score is amazing, and then they don't want to pay the composer for the next one, and they change it up. But the score for this one was great. So yeah,
Don't they do that with the directors too? They the first
Yeah.
one and the second one.
Unless your
Yeah.
name's Joss Whedon.
Joss Whedon, but they started
And
switching
apparently
it
now
up. And
the
yeah.
Russo brothers. I mean, that reminds me too. One of the things I really loved about the film when we were talking about that scene with the Avenger references. Sometimes Marvel's gotten a lot better at this, but early on, especially with their TV shows, they hammer you over the head with just for no reason out of nowhere dropping Avengers references. Right. Every Avengers reference in this movie had a purpose, and I love that scene when even Scott's line is, "Okay, I think the first thing we need to do is call the Avengers."
Yep.
And then Michael Douglas's reaction. Oh yeah, sorry. When they're not too busy dropping cities out of the sky, I've been working for decades to keep this technology out of the hands of a Stark. I'm not about to put into
great.
another Stark. Perfect
Yeah.
line. Great.
Yeah.
And then the way they introduced the new Avengers headquarters and Falcon and all that kind of stuff. So well done.
Good way to end the phase, because people forget that this ends phase 2.
This is the official end of phase 2.
and it
It
makes sense.
it wasn't Ultron.
No, and that's what makes sense about it, because when I heard that this was the end of phase 2, because when we went to the set visit the first time, they were trying to sell us on that there wasn't going to be. Kevin Feige was like, well, it takes place in the universe, obviously, but there's not going to be a lot of call back to it. And then when we went to ILM, they showed us the scene with Falcon, and they went, well, you guys. But that's why it makes sense, especially when they show that end scene that you were talking about with Winter Soldier, that this should be the movie that ends phase 2.
Yeah, and you're right. That's a great point, that this is a perfect ending to phase 2 as well. All right, so Dennis, let's give us your closing thoughts on Ant-Man as well as your score out of 10.
Well, I think we should give credit to Marvel too, in the same way that Thor was the predecessor for Guardians of the Galaxy. Now
Right.
Guardians of the Galaxy, a predecessor for something like Ant-Man, because Ant-Man cannot come out in phase 1. You can't have Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and then Ant-Man.
Right.
You had to build up to it. So the silliness of it. It's a guy that shrinks, and he controls ants with his helmet thing. You buy that into it because Marvel has built up that track record. So, and like I said, it's a great change of pace from Age of Ultron, which I also really liked. And I think people will find it entertaining as long as you don't go in with the expectation of, oh, this is going to be a tons of action and people fighting and tons of different characters. It's a more personal film, and it's about relationships. And if you buy into relationships like I did, and I'm sure you guys did, then I think you're going to get a lot out of it. I'm going to give it 8 out of 10.
I found this movie thoroughly entertaining. At its core, as Dennis just pointed out, this really is a human story. It's about fathers and sons, fathers and daughters, those types of relationships, the ones that fail, the ones that succeed, and the ones that can be redeemed. And it's all held within this container of this fantastical world that Marvel created for us. And at its heart, it's a heist film. And it's a really good heist film filled with really good characters that all have a significant role to play at one point or another throughout it. It doesn't feel like there's any wasted energy here and there. Paul Rudd, a lot of people were wondering, can he fit into this Marvel Cinematic Universe? There was a resounding answer to that question. That answer is yes. Paul Rudd is Ant-Man, and it's great. And I can't wait to see what they do with Michael Douglas. And in talking to Michael Douglas, I just asked him, are they going to do more stuff with Hank? He goes, well, what I'll say is this. He goes, I would love to do more stuff with Hank Pym. And so I think we're going to see more with Hank Pym. This is an entertaining film. I adored it. I believe probably my second favorite Marvel standalone film. I'm going to give this film an 8.5. Mark.
It's about fathers and daughters and fathers and sons, but it's also about ants. And when a movie can surprise me, because I don't really care about ants that much. I also didn't care about Guardians of the Galaxy until I went and saw the movie and was blown away. This was the same treat. This is exactly why I go to the movies. And I think, I'm going to disagree with you, John. I think this movie is for everybody. I think everybody can get something out of this because you're going to laugh a lot. There's great action sequences. There's great buildup. There's great story. The script is so tight. It's everything that they tried to pull off works. And they went for some pretty ambitious stuff. It's a smaller story, but there was a lot on the table here. And so if this movie was a failure, it wasn't going to end the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but the fact that it's such a triumph only adds to the MCU, which I'm already a big fan of. So I think you guys, when you go see this movie, or hope you already saw this movie because you're watching the spoiler review, I hope you go see it again. You'll probably see me sitting there in the theater next to you cranking 2 large popcorns. It's just that much fun.
And your score?
9 out of 10.
Christian.
I'm just impressed. I'm impressed with this movie. I'm impressed with everyone around the horn here. I'm impressed with Marvel and the way that everyone was so convinced. Oh, all these problems with Edgar Wright.
Yeah.
This is going to be Marvel's first bomb. This is it. This is the one. And they weathered the storm, and they didn't just place anyone in there. And even and myself included, when they got a comedy director, what are they doing? Where are they going with this story? And every time we thought with what they did with Guardians, people were saying, what is this? What is this property? They said, relax, we got it handled. We got James Gunn. They delivered. Well, they did it again here with Peyton Reed because they got a guy who knows the property. They got Ant-Man himself, Paul Rudd, who was working with Edgar Wright originally, turned that script into something really special. It has heart. It's by all means, it's a heist film, and it's a movie that really ties into everything that we love about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and furthers along the next generation, because ultimately what you're going to have to do in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is introduce new characters that we're going to latch onto, because eventually, the Captain Americas and Tony Starks and Thors will have to go the way of the Gon, and the way of the Gon, and guys like Scott Lang and brand new characters, the Evangeline Lilly's character. These are going to be the new generation of people, and in order to do that, you set up movies like this with good humor, great stories, and furthering along the existing universe.
And your score?
Sorry, 9 out of 10.
All right, so we got 9 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 8.5, and 8. Folks, the important thing is, what did you think of the new Ant-Man? Jump into the comments section. What did you like, or what do you agree with or disagree with about the points we raised? What are some things we forgot to bring up, maybe either on the positive or the negative side? And what would you give Ant-Man a score out of? So we want to know what you guys think. I want to thank the guys sitting at the table with me, of course, Dennis Zen, Mark Ellis, Christian Harloff over there. My name's John Camby. Guys, don't forget, subscribe to our YouTube channel here on Collider Video. Keep you up to date on all the stuff that we got going on. So for the guys at the table, for Ray and Wendy back there, thank you most of all to you guys, and we will see you next time.